Sometimes I replay those nights in my head wondering if I should have seen it sooner. If the music was already whispering secrets I refused to hear. Maybe it all began the first time she came home glowing, her laughter lighter than it had been in months. I wanted to believe it was happiness. I wanted to believe it was me, but it wasn't. Before I get into it, thank you for listening. These stories aren't easy to share, but they're real. So if you're here, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were in my place. Now, let's go back to where it all started. I met my wife Laura when we were both 26. She was the kind of woman who carried warmth with her like a small sun in human form. She smiled easily, laughed hard, and danced like her body already knew the rhythm of every song before it started. That's actually how we met at a friend's wedding, where she pulled me onto the dance floor even though I swore I couldn't dance. Years later, that same spark was still there, or at least it had been. But something about life has a way of dulling even the brightest lights. 2 kids, work deadlines, bills, and the quiet routines that replace adventure, it all chipped away at that energy we once shared. She'd always been expressive through dance, through motion, through touch. I, on the other hand, had become still. My job kept me buried in spreadsheets and conference calls. I worked from home most days, half present in the same rooms where she folded laundry and helped the kids with homework. We existed in parallel, connected by habit but drifting in spirit. One night, after dinner, Laura said something that caught me off guard. You know what I miss? Dancing. She was sitting cross-legged on the couch, hair tied up, wearing that old gray hoodie I loved. The TV flickered quietly in the background, but her eyes were somewhere else. Then dance, I said, a little too flatly. She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. It's not the same. I miss feeling like I'm good at something, like I'm alive again. It stung because I realized I hadn't made her feel that way in a long time. A week later, she found a local dance studio, one of those trendy ones downtown that offered everything from salsa to contemporary. She signed up for a 6-week private class. I encouraged it, honestly. I thought maybe it would help her get that spark back, maybe even help us. The first time she mentioned her instructor's name, it was casual. His name's Julian, she said. He's been teaching for years, super professional. Apparently, he used to compete internationally. I nodded, half listening, half scrolling through an email. She laughed softly. Don't worry, I'm not running away with a dancer. It was a joke, one I didn't even laugh at. A few weeks later, though, I noticed the change. She'd come home from her classes flushed, smiling, her cheeks glowing in that way they hadn't in a long time. The kids would be asleep, and she'd hum as she unpacked leftovers or poured herself a glass of wine. Sometimes, she'd show me a few steps pulling me off the couch to teach me how to move my feet. Just like that, Mark, relax your shoulders, she'd say, laughing as I stumbled. Her touch lingered longer than usual, like she was trying to transfer something into me, some kind of energy she'd rediscovered. And yet, there was a subtle distance too. She was lighter, but further away. One night, I offered to pick her up from class. She hesitated. You don't have to, she said quickly. I usually stay a few minutes after, just stretching and cooling down. Her tone was soft, but something about it felt like a closed door. I brushed it off at first. She deserved time for herself, but then she started dressing differently for class. Tighter tops, new shoes, hair done just right. It wasn't vanity, it was intentional. And that's when I started to wonder. A Thursday evening, 3 weeks into her lessons, I had to drop off some documents at a client's office not far from her studio. The timing lined up, and without really thinking about it, I decided to swing by and surprise her, maybe walk her home. When I parked near the studio, I heard music through the glass, soft Latin beats spilling into the street. Through the front window, I could see people moving inside, a swirl of motion and color under dim golden light. And there she was, Laura, laughing, her body flowing in perfect rhythm, her hand resting in his Julian's. He was tall, athletic, his movements graceful and precise. There was something magnetic about the way he guided her, how she seemed to move effortlessly under his touch. She wasn't just dancing, she was alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. For a few seconds, I just watched, frozen on the sidewalk, a strange mixture of pride and unease swirling in my chest. She looked beautiful, but she also looked like someone I didn't quite know anymore. When the song ended, they stopped. She laughed, head tilted back slightly, her hand resting lightly on his arm as he said something that made her smile. Too close, too comfortable. I stepped back before she could see me and left. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was dance, not intimacy. But that image, her eyes on him, that glow on her face stayed with me. The following week, she started mentioning him more often. Julian says my posture's improving. Julian thinks I could do a showcase someday. Julian told me I have great rhythm. Each mention felt like a pebble dropped into the quiet pond of our marriage, sending ripples I didn't know how to stop. Friday night, after the kids were asleep, I brought it up. You talk about Julian a lot lately, I said, trying to sound casual. She looked at me, surprised, then laughed softly. You're not jealous, are you? No, I said quickly. Too quickly. She smiled, that same faint, teasing smile. He's just a teacher, Mark. You should come watch sometime, you'd see how harmless it is. Maybe it was harmless. Maybe it wasn't. But something inside me shifted that night. I lay awake long after she'd fallen asleep beside me, her breathing slow and steady. The faint scent of her new perfume, something floral and light, lingered in the air. And I kept thinking about the way she'd looked in that studio, under the soft lights, her laughter blending with the music. Was that really my wife I was watching? The next week, she invited me to her final private lesson, the end of her 6-week package. She said they were doing a small routine she wanted me to see. I said yes. That evening, I sat in the corner of the studio, surrounded by mirrors and music. The lights were low, the air warm. And as they began to move together, something inside me twisted. It was slow, intimate, each step a conversation I wasn't part of. Their bodies mirrored one another perfectly, her face flushed, his focus entirely on her. When the song ended, she turned to me, eyes shining. What do you think? I smiled or tried to. You were incredible. Julian nodded politely. She's a natural. You should be proud. Proud. That's what I told myself as we left. But when she slipped her arm through mine, her skin still warm from his touch, I felt a spark of something else entirely. Something darker. That night, she fell asleep almost instantly. I stayed awake again, staring at the ceiling, the faint rhythm of that final song echoing in my head. And I couldn't help but wonder, what exactly had I just witnessed being born between them? Over the next few days, I tried to shake the feeling. I told myself I was paranoid, that she deserved to be happy, that dancing was harmless. But there was something about the way she seemed to exist half in another world now, one built on rhythm and connection. Her phone buzzed more often. She smiled at her screen a little too long before setting it down. When I asked, she said it was her dance group. They were forming a small social circle for weekend events. It made sense. It all made sense. Until it didn't. One Saturday morning, I found her in the kitchen, phone in hand, humming softly as she sipped her coffee. She looked radiant, even in her pajamas, hair messy, sunlight spilling over her face. You're in a good mood, I said. She smiled. I am. Julian asked if I wanted to join a small performance he's putting together for the studio's anniversary. Just 2 couples. Nothing big. I hesitated. You're performing with him? Yeah, she said casually. It's just one routine. He said I have great chemistry on the floor. There it was, that word, chemistry. It hung between us like a spark waiting for oxygen. I didn't say anything, but she must have felt the air change. She touched my arm lightly. Mark, come on. You know what this means to me. It's just dancing. Just dancing. But later, when she left for rehearsal, I stood at the window watching her walk to the car hair done, red lipstick, that same perfume. The way she checked her reflection in the side mirror before driving off felt like something more than confidence. It was intention. I tried to distract myself. Work, errands, even helping the kids with their school projects. But my mind kept circling back to her, to them. That evening, when she came home, it was late past 10. She looked exhausted but satisfied. She dropped her bag on the couch and kicked off her shoes. How was it? I asked, trying to sound casual. She smiled faintly. Good. We're still working out the lifts. Lifts? She laughed. Relax. Nothing dangerous. Just trust stuff. It's about flow and connection. Connection. There it was again. The same word, repackaged. She leaned down and kissed my forehead on her way upstairs. That simple gesture, the one I used to crave, felt oddly rehearsed, like punctuation at the end of a lie. The following week, I told myself I'd go see one of the rehearsals. She didn't object. But when I arrived at the studio, the door was locked, lights low. Through the window, I saw only their reflections in the mirror close, synchronized, intimate. The music pulsed low and steady. She was in his arms. Not pressed together, not in any way obscene. But there was something about the way she moved, like every ounce of her attention belonged to him. Her hand rested on his shoulder, her head tilted toward his voice. He whispered something, and she laughed, the sound soft, private. I stood there for maybe a minute before backing away into the street, heart pounding with a confusion I couldn't name. It wasn't anger exactly, it was grief, maybe. The grief of realizing someone you love has found a world that doesn't need you in it. That night, when she came home, she didn't see me watching her from the shadows of our living room. She paused in front of the mirror by the door, touching her hair, smiling faintly to herself. Not for me. I confronted her 2 days later. Not directly, more like a test. "You've been spending a lot of time at the studio," I said over dinner. She didn't look defensive, just tired. "It's important to me. I'm not doing anything wrong." "You didn't say you were." Silence stretched between us, thin and sharp. She set down her fork. "You think something's going on, don't you?" "I think," I paused, the words thick in my throat. "I think you've changed." She looked at me for a long time. "Maybe I have, but not in the way you think." Her tone was firm, calm, almost pitying, and that made it worse. That night, I dreamt of them dancing. The mirrors endless, their reflections infinite. I woke up sweating, my chest tight. A few days later, I found a text on her tablet, the one she rarely used. It wasn't explicit, but it was enough. "You were incredible tonight. You're finally dancing like you mean it." No name, no context. But it didn't have to. When I confronted her, she froze. Then she sighed and sat down. "Mark," she whispered, "it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" Her voice trembled. "He's been helping me feel like myself again. That's all. It's not about him, it's about me." "Does he text all his students like that?" She didn't answer. For the first time in years, I saw tears in her eyes, not from guilt, but from something deeper. A fracture. "I don't want to lose you," she said quietly. "But I also can't go back to feeling invisible." Her words cut through me, because somewhere deep down, I knew she was right. We decided on space. She'd keep dancing, but with boundaries, no late-night rehearsals, no private sessions. For a while, things actually got better. She was present again. We talked more. We laughed, sometimes even cooked together. But calm never lasts when the storm is unfinished. One evening, she got a call. She stepped outside to take it. Her voice was low, urgent. I couldn't hear the words, but I heard her laugh. That same quiet, nervous laugh she used when she didn't want to admit something. When she came back inside, she looked distracted. "That was just the studio," she said quickly. "They need extra help for the showcase." But later, as she showered, I noticed something on the bathroom counter. A small envelope. Inside was a printed invitation, "Private Studio Gala, invite only," featuring performances by Julian Marlowe and Laura Bennett. Her maiden name, she hadn't told me. The night of the gala, she said she was meeting a friend before the show, that it wasn't open to the public. I didn't argue. Instead, I drove downtown, parked 2 blocks away, and walked to the venue. The lights inside were dim, elegant. Through the glass, I could see couples mingling, champagne in hand. On stage, a spotlight waited. Then the music started. Laura stepped into the light in a black dress that shimmered under the gold stage glow. Julian stood opposite her, his hand extended. The song was slow, sensual, but it wasn't the choreography that undid me. It was her face. The softness, the surrender. The way she looked at him like he was gravity and she'd been falling her whole life, waiting to hit the ground. And when the music ended, he held her hand just a fraction too long. She didn't pull away. The applause drowned out everything else. But in that moment, I knew. Something between them had crossed an invisible line quietly, irrevocably. She came home late, cheeks still flushed. I waited in the dark, pretending to be asleep. I felt the mattress dip as she climbed into bed. For a while, she lay still. Then, softly, she whispered into the dark. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." Her voice cracked, just once. And my heart, my stupid, hopeful heart, broke in silence beside her. But the next morning, when I woke up, she was gone. Her side of the bed empty. Her phone missing. Her dance bag, too. And on the kitchen counter, folded neatly beside a cold cup of coffee, was a note with just 3 words. "I need time." I don't remember how long I stood in the kitchen staring at that note. Her handwriting, so small and careful, felt like a ghost of her voice. I need time. Time for what? To think? To feel? To decide between me and him? The coffee had gone cold, and yet I couldn't move. It was the first morning in 10 years that our house felt empty. For the next few days, I tried to act normal. I went to work, answered emails, cooked dinner I didn't eat. The quiet pressed in, heavy and unrelenting. Every sound, the hum of the fridge, the creak of the floorboards reminded me of her absence. By the third day, I broke. I called her phone. It went to voicemail. I texted. No reply. And then, just as I was beginning to spiral, she messaged me. I'm staying at the studio apartment above the school. Please, just give me a little space. I wanted to go there, to see her, to demand answers. But something in her words, something pleading, kept me away. Still, I couldn't stop myself from driving past the studio one night. The windows upstairs were lit. Through the sheer curtains, I saw a shadow move a figure that might have been hers. Another shadow joined it. My stomach turned cold. The next morning, she called. Her voice was calm, almost too calm. Mark, can we talk? We met at a cafe near the park. She looked different, tired, pale, but peaceful in a way that scared me. I didn't mean to disappear, she said. I just needed to breathe. You could have breathed here, I said quietly. She looked down. Not with everything between us. Not with you looking at me like I'm already guilty. Are you? I asked before I could stop myself. Her eyes met mine then, and for a split second I saw something raw and unguarded flash across her face. I don't know anymore, she whispered. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying her voice, those words, I don't know anymore. Around midnight, I got in the car. I didn't plan to go to the studio. But somehow, that's where I ended up. The building was dark, except for a faint glow from upstairs. I stood there, heart pounding, unsure if I wanted to go in or drive away forever. But before I could decide, the door opened. It was her. She froze when she saw me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Mark, she breathed. What are you doing here? I don't know, I said. I just needed to see you. There was silence. Then, softly, she said, come up. The studio apartment above the school was small bare walls, a couch, a table with 2 mugs. The faint smell of lavender hung in the air. Julian wasn't there. Thank God. I thought you'd be with him, I said quietly. She closed the door behind me. He's at a late class. I asked him for space too. So, it's true then. She didn't answer. Instead, she walked toward the window, arms wrapped around herself. Mark, I didn't plan this. I didn't even want this. He just saw me when I didn't see myself anymore. And I didn't? Her eyes filled. You stopped trying. You stopped looking. Her voice cracked then. And that sound, the hurt in it, undid something in me. I took a step forward, then another, until I was standing right behind her. Laura, I whispered, I never stopped seeing you. I just didn't know how to reach you anymore. She turned slowly, her face inches from mine. And now? For a long moment, we just stood there, breathing the same air. I could feel her trembling. Now, I just want the truth, I said. Tears slipped down her cheeks. The truth is, I let something happen that shouldn't have. Nothing's gone too far, but it's close. Too close. My chest tightened. Did you love him? She shook her head quickly. No, but I needed him, the way I used to need you. The words stung worse than any confession could. I should have walked away. I should have left her there, with her guilt and mine. But instead, I reached up, brushing away one of her tears. She closed her eyes at the touch, leaning into my hand as if it anchored her. Mark, she whispered, I'm sorry. Her voice was so small, so real, that all my anger melted into something more dangerous longing, the kind born not of desire, but of grief for what used to be. Her hand found mine, fingers trembling. The moment felt suspended, every breath, every heartbeat amplified. Then she kissed me, softly at first, hesitant, then with the desperate ache of someone clinging to what they're afraid they've already lost. I didn't resist. I couldn't. The months of silence, suspicion, and distance collapsed in that single touch. The world outside faded until there was only the sound of our breathing, the warmth of her skin beneath my hands. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she looked at me not through me, not past me, but at me. When she whispered, I still love you, it felt both like forgiveness and farewell. We moved together without thinking, clothes half forgotten, words half formed. The kiss deepened, then softened again, until it became something fragile, something that couldn't last. The night blurred. There was no passion in the selfish sense, only the quiet ache of two people trying to find their way back through all the wrong turns they'd taken. When it was over, we sat side by side on the couch. The city lights bled through the curtains, painting her skin in silver. She was crying again, quietly. "That shouldn't have happened," she whispered. "I know, but I don't regret it." Neither did I. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was charged thick with everything we couldn't say. After a while, she stood, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Julian's coming back soon," she said softly. I froze. "You mean tonight?" She nodded. "He's been helping with cleanup. He'll be here any minute." Something in her tone shifted guilt, fear, confusion, all tangled together. I stood slowly. "Then I should go." She didn't stop me, but as I reached the door, she whispered, "Mark?" I turned. Her eyes were red, her lips trembling. "Whatever happens next, please don't hate me." Before I could answer, footsteps echoed on the stairs outside. We both froze. Her gaze darted to the door, then back to me pleading. "Please," she mouthed. And for a heartbeat, I didn't know whether to hide, to stay, or to face whatever came through that door. The knob turned. The door began to open. And in that charged, silent second where breath and consequence hung on the edge of discovery, I realized nothing in our lives would ever be the same again. The door creaked open, and in that split second, my pulse roared in my ears. Laura froze, eyes wide, clutching the blanket to her chest. The sound of footsteps slow, heavy filled the narrow stairway. Then his voice. "Laura, you left the downstairs lights on." "Julian." I felt the world collapse into a single heartbeat. He stepped inside, his silhouette framed by the hall light, casual, unsuspecting. My hand was already on the doorknob. "Mark?" The way he said my name surprised, not angry, cut deeper than any accusation. Laura whispered, "Julian." "It's not." But her voice faltered, caught between explanation and guilt. I stepped forward, forcing something like calm into my voice. "I just came to talk to her." He frowned, gaze darting from me to Laura, to the rumpled blanket on the couch. The air thickened, unbearable. His jaw tightened. "At midnight?" I had no answer. Neither did she. That silence said everything. The next few seconds stretched forever. Julian dropped his duffel bag onto the floor, the sound echoing like thunder. His face twisted, not in rage, but in disbelief. "Laura, tell me I'm wrong." She didn't. I'll never forget the look that crossed his face, then hurt layered beneath realization, like something precious breaking in slow motion. He didn't yell, he didn't strike out, he just turned and walked out the door. The slam rattled the frame. Laura sank onto the couch, her body folding in on itself. "Oh God, Mark, what have we done?" But I didn't have an answer for that either. The days that followed blurred together. Julian quit the dance school. Word spread quietly, as rumors always do. Laura withdrew from everyone. She told me she needed space again, but this time, it sounded final. She moved out of our home for a while, staying with her sister. I tried to call, to apologize, to offer anything that might bridge the wreckage. But she wouldn't answer. When we finally spoke weeks later, her voice was thin, tired. "Mark," she said, "we can't keep pretending that night didn't happen. It changed everything." "I know. Julian's gone. He left the city. He won't even talk to me." I closed my eyes. "Do you still want us?" A long pause. Then, "I don't know. I want peace. That's all I know right now." It wasn't an answer, but it was honest. Autumn came. The leaves fell and gathered on the steps outside the house she hadn't returned to. I still mowed the lawn, still checked the mail, still made coffee for 2 every morning, an absurd ritual of denial. People at work noticed I'd changed. I smiled less, talked less. I told them Laura was visiting family, that things were fine. It was easier than explaining the truth that sometimes love doesn't end with a scream, but with a quiet collapse. Then, one evening, she came by. I heard her before. I saw her the crunch of leaves on the path, the knock that used to mean I'm home. When I opened the door, she was standing there in her old gray coat, looking both familiar and impossibly distant. "You still have my things in the closet?" she said softly. "Yeah, I didn't touch them." She smiled sadly. "Of course you didn't." We stood in silence, the way people do when there's too much between them and not enough left to say. Over tea, she told me she was starting over, moving to a new studio somewhere coastal, quieter. "I need to rebuild myself," she said. "Away from all this." "And us?" I asked. Her fingers tightened around her cup. Us is part of the all this, Mark. I wanted to argue, to say love was worth salvaging, but even I didn't believe it fully anymore. The truth was, we'd both been drifting long before Julian ever entered the picture. He was just the spark that lit what was already waiting to burn. Still, watching her prepare to leave, I felt that familiar ache rise again, the kind that sits just behind the ribs, quiet and endless. Do you love him? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. She shook her head slowly. No, but he reminded me what it felt like to be wanted. I wish that had been you. That hurt more than anything else she could have said. Weeks passed. She left town. I helped her load the last box into her car. We stood there in the driveway as dusk settled, our breath visible in the cold. You'll be okay? I asked. Eventually. She touched my arm, a light, fleeting touch that carried years of what-ifs. You will too, Mark. You just don't know it yet. And then she was gone. Her taillights disappeared down the street, swallowed by fog. I stood there long after, listening to the silence settle over everything we'd built and broken. It's been 6 months now. Her studio's website sometimes pops up on my feed photos of smiling students, bright lights, polished floors. She looks happy, maybe freer. I haven't reached out. I've written a dozen messages and deleted them all. What would I even say? I forgive you? That feels too easy. I still love you? Too late. Instead, I've learned to live with the echoes. The half-drunk coffee mugs. The piano she used to play, still sitting untouched in the corner. Some nights, when the house feels too quiet, I drive by the old dance school. The sign's still there, faded now. Through the dusty windows, I can almost see her the way she'd move, graceful and unguarded, before everything changed. And sometimes I wonder if Julian ever thinks of her too. Of that night, of the way love can twist itself into something unrecognizable when left untended too long. Maybe there are no villains in this story, just people lonely, human, flawed, trying to feel seen again. That's the part no one tells you. Infidelity isn't always about passion. Sometimes it's about the silence that grows between two people who've forgotten how to reach across it. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this love isn't lost all at once. It leaks out slowly, drop by drop, until one day you wake up and realize the person beside you is a stranger. Now, when people ask if I'd take her back, I pause before answering. Not because I don't know, but because maybe that's not the right question anymore. Maybe the real question is whether we ever learn to forgive ourselves. What would you have done? If someone you loved slipped away into someone else's world, would you fight to bring them back, or let them go to find their peace? Tell me in the comments below. And if you're still listening, thank you for staying with me through this. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories like mine. Sometimes, the hardest confessions are the ones that never leave the heart.